And joining us now to talk about the myths and realities of digital literacy in Palo Alto, California, Andrea Lunsford, Director of Writing and Rhetoric at Stanford University. And Andrea Lunsford, just before I ask you my first question, that is the most extraordinary title of, I think, anybody I've ever interviewed. Well, what's the story behind that title? Writing and Rhetoric. That's a good one.
That's the name of our writing program here at Stanford, and we include rhetoric because the ancient tradition of rhetoric included oral performance, and we think that oral performance is a big part of what writing is today.
Okay, well, let's you and I perform right now. How about this? English professor John Sutherland from University College in London is, I guess, one of the most outspoken voices among those who believe that technology is killing the art of reading and writing. He thinks Facebook and video and texting has made language, quote, bleak, bold, and sad shorthand. Now, you've organized a project, the Stanford Study of Writing, to see if that is indeed the case. Tell us, what did you do? What did you find?
Well, I followed a group of about 190 students at Stanford for almost 6 years, and I asked them to contribute all of their writing to an electronic database, an Oracle database. And I asked them to please submit everything that they had submitted for classwork, but then I asked them to submit anything else they wanted to. And so I have about 15,000 pieces of student writing in this database. We're almost finished coding it, and I'm working on a book-length report about this project. So I've got every kind of text I think you could just about imagine. I have email in 11 languages, I have text messaging of all kind, I have journaling, I have poetry. I've never seen so many closeted poets as there seem to be on the Stanford campus. Everybody here seems to be writing poetry. PowerPoint presentations, all other kinds of presentational software. I have a 3.5-hour hip opera written by an undergraduate and performed in her junior year. So I have a huge database of student writing.
You have a ton of content. Was any of it actually written by hand?
Very, very little. I have some student notes, some student in-class work, and all of what was written by hand we scanned and then digitized.
And after looking at all of that quite exhaustive list of content, were you able to conclude whether or not technology is in fact ruining their ability to write?
Well, if it is, you can't tell it from looking at these pieces of writing. These students they're pretty good writers when they get to college. Although their abilities are really all over the board. At 17 or 18 years old, writing ability is in great flux, and the 4 years of college are a time for really growth in writing. So they're all over the map in their freshman year. But we did see steady improvement in writing across the years in the one empirical study that we've done so far of just looking at across the 5 years of the study. On every index that we could measure, we found some improvement. I think what I'd like to say is that by the time students get to college, they understand who their audiences are, and they understand what the purpose of writing is, and they know if they're writing to a college professor that they're not on Twitter. They just know that, and they adjust their writing accordingly.
Let me ask you more about these students, because I guess we need to know, were they, representative of a broad range of diverse backgrounds and all of that kind of thing?
Yes, this was a random sample of the incoming class, so I invited 241 students and 189 accepted the invitation, and the demographics of this group matched up very well to the demographics of the Stanford class as a whole, which meant it was very diverse.
Did any particular group of students excel at this more than any other?
Excel at?
At the writing, at making sense of, and you're making sense of what they were writing.
I see what you mean. The students in the humanities in general wrote a lot more and hence had more opportunities for writing than students who ended up in the sciences. But I couldn't pull out one, let's say, ethnic group or one, or a women, for instance, writing better than men. No, they were pretty uniform.
Okay, one of the things you also tested for was, quote unquote, confidence in writing. How do you measure confidence in writing?
Well, we ask a lot of questions about confidence levels. The theory being that if you ask the same question in several different ways, students will begin to give you what their real confidence level is. So it was done by questionnaire and interview. And this group of students, they were the most confident they ever were when they entered Stanford. They never regained that level of confidence, even a year after graduation, although they came pretty close.
So you've managed to crush the life out of them after a 4 or 5 year program, whatever it is.
Their confidence plummeted in their first year and then started to climb after the first year.
Good for you. What type of writing did they prefer the most?
The students in this study, in the interviews, reported liking writing that made something happen in the world. That's how they defined good writing. And we came out of the study with that as one of our most important findings, that for this group of young people, future leaders in many fields, they want writing to do something. They want it to be active, they want it to be performative, they want it to make something happen. So over and over again they said, good writing is writing that makes something happen. And by that they meant, let's say, a series of posters for an AIDS walk that might raise $60,000 for AIDS research, or they meant a poster that would go up on campus demanding a rise in wages for temporary workers, or they meant a website they were designing for the Palo Alto Fire Department. Our students have designed the whole website for that group. So that kind of community-based or service-related writing that has a function in the world, was very compelling to them, and they spent a lot of their time engaged in those kinds of writing projects. They contrasted that to the writing they were doing in class, and they were less interested in the in-class writing unless it hooked into some of their outside interests.
Well, that's what I was going to follow up on. Can they still do the kind of standard 2,000-word essay and have it make sense?
Yes, these students certainly can do that. I'm talking about Stanford students, so this is a select student body there. When students come in to Stanford, it's a very rigorous application process, but they are not all good writers. So the writing is all over the board, but they are all very bright and very keen, and they are determined to do well. I think if I look at another study that I've done of writing, first-year college writing across the whole United States, we see a lot greater variation in student ability. Students coming into college may be really unable to sustain a 2,000-word essay at the very beginning. They need a lot of coaching, a lot of support. And even at Stanford, I had some students in the study who had never had any advanced placement classes. They had never written anything. Several of the students said they had never written anything longer than 3 pages in high school. So if you have not done that, if you haven't had that exercise or experience, then obviously you're going to need some help doing it. And at Stanford, we have the Hume Writing Center, which supports all student writing from the first day to postgraduate school, and that's a great support for our students. They can go to the Writing Center anytime.
Let me ask you about another term that I saw in your report, the life writing, you call it. What is that, life writing?
Well, it's writing that doesn't have anything to do with school. It's for yourself. And these students did a lot of it. I mentioned the journals. I have read many, many intensely interesting and detailed journal pieces that students are really writing to themselves, or maybe they're writing just to share with family members. Blogs are the same way, sometimes intensely introspective and personal. One of the students in this study, one of our most prolific writers in the study, wrote some blog entries that I think are among the most thoughtful and provocative writing that I've run across in undergraduates, just really probing what it means to be alive in the 21st century, what his goals and aspirations are, what he felt he could do, where he felt he was a tremendous failure, those kinds of things. So that's life writing.
And what kind of an impact do you think the internet has had on that particular kind of writing?
Huge, because now audiences are everywhere. In fact, it's hard to tell who's a writer and who's an audience anymore, because the interaction is so instantaneous that sometimes someone receiving a message is creating a message at the same time. So the sense of having a real audience at the other end of your writing, I think that's what makes the social networking sites so popular with students and so helpful in terms of getting them writing even more and more and more, because they know they're writing to real people at the other end.
Okay, let me ask you one last thing before we join the others and continue the conversation. Here's a comment we received via Twitter from an English teacher. And it says, "I can't tell you how many times I had to circle LOL or WTF in senior essays." Now, I guess for those who aren't up on that kind of speak, LOL means laugh out loud, and WTF means something I can't say on television. How much
Right.
internet speak did you find in the content that you were looking at?
In the Stanford study of writing, in email and in blogs, we found some. In the college writing, we didn't find, we haven't found any to speak of yet. In the larger study I was talking about, the national study, the U.S. study, in looking at those essays written by first-year college students across the United States, I did not find one instance of an LOL or a smiley face. So something may be happening between the end of high school and the beginning of college. Students in college seem to know, they know Kairos, they know what's timely, what's appropriate in a particular place and time.
Well, that's good to know. Andrea Lunsford, stand by. We're going to reposition the cameras, have you join the rest of our group on the other side of the studio and continue our discussion. Thanks so much.
You're welcome.